my name is Brecken Boucher, and I love Storytime. Storytime is when our speakers share their favorite Bible stories and tell us how they apply to our lives today. This morning we are talking about the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Are you ready for Storytime?
Well, good morning and welcome to SouthCrest. How's everyone doing today? Wow, that's actually pretty good for a rainy Sunday morning. We're so glad you guys are here as we are in the middle of this series called Storytime, where we're looking at these Bible stories. Some of them are our favorite Bible stories. Some of them are just unique and odd and things you may not have heard of. We're going to dig into these stories, see what they have to tell us after we see what happened to them. Because I think sometimes we look at what happens in the Bible like, oh, that was cool back then, but how does it apply to us today? So we were going to dig into that and see what's going on. So as we get started today, I have to tell you, this is a story that I really like, so I may be a little bit more hyper than usual, okay? So I apologize in advance, but that's just a little PSA warning right there. So in 1969, a small burger chain opened up in Columbus, Ohio. And at that time, they only had 5 menu items. Now, one of those menu items changed my life forever. And that was the Frosty. In my humble opinion, it is the best fast food burger joint dessert in the history of all fast food burger joint desserts. It is so good. It is pure. It is simple, it is chocolatey, and it is deliciously fantastic. Okay, I love me some Frosty, okay? A dessert that for 37 years remained unchanged. But unfortunately, in 2006, Wendy's caved in. They bowed down to public opinion and pressure, and they introduced another flavor. If it's even a flavor, it's vanilla. Like, that's not even really a flavor, is it? I mean, it's just like plain. But they introduced this other flavor called vanilla. And what was once pure had now become tainted. It had become ruined. Tainted by the sinful ways of the world. You see, instead of appreciating the gift that God had given them in the Frosty, no, they wanted to take that gift and manipulate it to make it what they wanted. And take something good and pure and make it sinful and evil. And so they did that. Now, I can proudly stand here today and tell you, I have never caved. I have never given in. I have stayed true to the Frosty. It is only chocolate. The other flavors are just milkshakes, that they just happen to have on occasion. But so much so that sometimes when I go to Wendy's, I'll go up and say, hey, I want a Frosty. And they'll say, what flavor do you want? And I say, I want a Frosty. And the thing is, most of the time, most people are like, oh, yeah, it's a chocolate, okay? I did have one guy the other day just kind of stare back at me like, but we have flavors. And the other guy walked up and said, that means chocolate, Because there is only one Frosty. And I won't give in, all right? Have you ever found yourself having to stand firm in life? Having to make a stance for something that really matters? Maybe you're with me in the Frosty battle because you know that there is only one Frosty and the others are just milkshakes, no cap, okay? Or maybe you had something in life where you had to stand firm, that you really had to take a stance and say, hey, we're not doing this. We're not going this way. We're going to be here. If you're a parent in the room, this is one of your primary jobs, by the way, right? The parent's job is to be uncool, right? You may have heard your parents say this and you're like, I'm never going to say that. And then you find yourself saying it. But I don't care if everybody else is doing it. You're not. In other words, you're not giving in, you're not caving in, you're not conforming to the ways of the world, you're going to be different. I don't care what that costs you. But it can be hard, right? That can be hard to take that stand, and it was no different in biblical times. So today we're going to talk about 3 people that are actually older than I am and who did something very important. Their names are Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Those are their Jewish names. But when they got moved to Babylon, they got new names, which you know them as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Which, by the way, is interesting because in the book of Daniel, Daniel's name is Jewish. He doesn't go by his Babylonian name, but we call the other 3 by their Babylonian names. Because Daniel's Babylonian name was Belteshazzar, so we don't want to say that too much. So That's just a little interesting thing there. So we're going to look at these guys and see what's happening in their lives, okay? So you've probably heard this story, but I'm going to retell it, point some things out, and then we're going to see how it applies to our lives. So let me kind of set the stage, because I like setting stages. So the kingdom of Israel had sinned against God over and over and over and over again, and then Judah followed suit pretty closely. And so Israel was taken captive by the Babylonians, and about 60 years later, Judah was taken captive by the Babylonians, and Nebuchadnezzar was this king who was like ruling through this, okay? And what the Babylonians did that was really smart, that was intelligent of them, is once they conquered people, they made them work for them, okay? You've been conquered, now you have to do things for us. But the Babylonians were like, hey, this can become a problem, because if you take over people and you make them do work, they're not going to like that. They're going to rise up against us. And so how do we stop these insurrections? How do we stop these uprisings that are going to push us back? So they decided to move people around and shuffle people up. All right, if you ever watched that Christmas movie, The Grinch, the one with Jim Carrey, when he's in the mailroom and he starts grabbing the mail and goes, this one over here, that one over here, put the one over here, jury duty, jury duty, jury duty. It's kind of like that, but not really, okay? But what they would do is they would take people from Israel and move them to another country, and they would mix them all up. That way, all the people who were working in that area didn't speak the same language. They were confused, which I think is funny, because God did that at the Tower of Babel years ago, and here the Babylonians are doing the same thing. If we mix the languages, people can't communicate, they can't come together and unify against us, and therefore we reduce the risk of uprisings. Another thing the Babylonians did that was really, really smart. They said, hey, when we conquer these countries, they got some educated people, some nobles, some princes, things like these who have learning. Let's take them and bring them back to the capital and keep them away from everybody else. This was twofold. One, if you take all the natural-born leadership out of the room, fewer people are going to uprise, because followers typically don't lead uprisings. They're called followers for a reason. They're not leaders. So remove the leaders, people look to, then there's none of that can happen. The other thing is, hey, these are the smart people. We have this massive empire that's ever growing. We need help leading our country. So let's take the smart people, indoctrinate them into the Babylonian ways, all learning, all cultural, all resources, and they'll work for us. And so 2 birds, 1 stone. We increase our ranks of government with smart people, and they don't have people who can lead them to rise against us. So that's where we find ourselves happening today, okay? Super smart thing going on there. So this is what we see happening in the first part of the book of Daniel, this shuffling taking place. So Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were taken off to Babylon, put in Babylonian leadership training. They got to eat from the king's table, and they got to take all these classes. Now, the only problem was they weren't allowed to eat what was on the king's table. If you know anything about the Israelites' history, Jesus gave them a list of foods you can eat and foods you can't eat, right? Babylonians didn't have that. They ate whatever they wanted to. So Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego all of a sudden are like, hey, we can't eat this stuff. And so that posed the first test in their life. That posed this situation that they're going to have to figure out what to do. So they sit around, get into a huddle, and then Daniel goes to the guy that's keeping him and says, hey, we really don't want to eat this food, so can we just have like vegetables and water and stuff like that? And the guy was like, hey, that sounds great, but here's the problem. If you don't look as good as everybody else, the king's going to kill me. So I'm not really down with this. So no. And Daniel's like, well, but wait. What about a 10-day money-back guarantee? Okay? What about that? For 10 days, you let the 4 of us just do water and vegetables, and at the end of 10 days, you take a look at us, compare us to everybody else, right? If we don't look as healthy and as strong as they do, then we'll go eat the food you told us to eat. And the guy was like, 10 days, can't be that bad, sure. I'll buy into that. So this is what's going on here. So at the end of 10 days, they present themselves back to the keeper, and not only are they equivalent, they're actually better than. They look stronger and healthier than the others. And so the guard's like, hey, you keep on doing what you're doing. But what's happening here is that they were presented with a test. And when they were given a test, they chose to honor God before they honored themselves, before they gave into fear. They stood firm and didn't bow down and cave in. And because of that, God decided to honor them and bless them. We see Daniel 1, 17 through 20, it says this. As for these 4 youths, God gave them learning and skill in all literature and wisdom, and Daniel had understanding in all visions and dreams. At the end of the time, when the king had commanded that they should be brought in, the chief of the eunuchs brought them in before Nebuchadnezzar. And the king spoke with them, and among all of them there was none found like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Therefore they stood before the king. And in every matter of wisdom and understanding about which the king inquired of them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and enchanters that were in all his kingdom. Y'all get that? They were smarter than their teachers, 10 times smarter than their teachers. God blessed them tremendously through that. He said, hey, because you honored me, I'm going to put you into a great place. It's important that you hold on to that because we're going to come back to it. We're going to fast forward about 20 years, okay? Nebuchadnezzar had pretty much dominated the world at this point. So he's in control. He's kind of hit cruise control for a bit now, getting pretty bored and decided, hey, I want to do something. I'm going to build a golden statue of myself, 90 feet tall. Okay, that's 9 stories. There's nothing in LaGrange that big, okay? It's a massive statue. Man's got ego issues, okay? He's like, hey, I'm going to build a 90-foot statue. And not only am I going to build this statue, but when it's done, I want everyone to bow down and worship me through this statue. This is going to be awesome. And he was so intent on people worshiping him that when he told people this is what's going to happen, he put a little caveat at the end that said, by the way, if you don't want to do this, not a problem, I'll just kill you. Okay? I'm going to throw you into a fiery furnace and you'll burn. And so most people are like, hey, we're going to bow down. So the day came, right, to do this great bowing down thing. And Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego like, yeah, not going to do that. Sorry. Yeah, not going to happen. You know, not on my watch. And Nebuchadnezzar got mad. But at the same time, Nebuchadnezzar was like, but these are my smartest dudes. And so Nebuchadnezzar gave them a second chance. I don't think anybody else would have given a second chance, but these 3 guys did. He's like, listen, maybe you didn't understand it the first time. I know it's confusing. We all speak different languages, even though you're smarter than everybody else. But here, let's just try this again, okay? I know you're smart. You should figure this out. Statue, bow down, no fire. Statue, no bow down, Bernie, 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 okay? And so they're like, okay, king, we got to talk to you. So in verse 16, we see this. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter. If this be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of your hand, O king. But if not, be it known to you, O king, that we will not serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up. This passage right here is what I consider the greatest statement of faith in the Bible. That's just my opinion. But when faced with a fiery furnace, when faced with intimate death, this is what their response was. Hey, guess what? God can deliver us. But if not, even if he doesn't, we're still not going to bow down. They didn't say he would. He said that he's able. In other words, hey, we're putting faith in God because God is who we serve and honor. We're putting faith in him that he can save us if he wants to. But even if he doesn't want to, and this is our end, we're going out. We're going to die. I get chills every time I read that. It just always takes me to this place of, wow, what incredible faith these men had. Needless to say, Nebuchadnezzar was not happy with them. He actually became furious with them. He ordered the furnace to be heated 7 times hotter than normal. Like, fire's hot enough. I don't know why you have to make fire 7 times hotter than fire, but that's what he did. This fire was so hot that they bound Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, so guards had to take them up there to push them into the furnace. The guards who took them up there died from the heat. All right? That's how hot it was. That being that close to it killed them. And what happens next changes everything. And to be honest with you, what happens next is actually kind of gross, okay? Because apparently this fiery furnace had a window. And so when he threw them in there, Nebuchadnezzar went to go watch. He went to go see what was happening. I just think that's gross, okay, personally. I don't want to watch people burn, but he did. So he goes over there, and he looks in, and guess what? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are no longer bound, and they're just walking around in the fire. They're just chilling out. And there's another dude with them. And Nebuchadnezzar's like, hey, smart guys over there, smart guys. I threw in 3 guys, right? we threw in 3. And they're like, oh, yeah, we threw in 3 guys. They're like, you sure? 3 guys, right? Yeah, 3. Okay, I got a problem because I see 4 guys in the fire. And one of them looks like the son of God's. And so then Nebuchadnezzar's like, they're walking around. What do I do now, right? Like, how long are you going to wait? So he calls out to him to find out what is going on. 26, we see this. Then Nebuchadnezzar came near to the door of the burning fire furnace. He declared, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out and come here. Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out from the fire. And the satraps, the prefects, the governors, and the king's counselors gathered together and saw that the fire had not had any power over the bodies of those men. The hair of their heads was not singed, their cloaks were not harmed, and no smell of fire had come upon them. Nebuchadnezzar answered and said, blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and delivered his servants who trusted in him and set aside the king's command and yielded up their bodies rather than serve and worship any god except for their own God. I don't know if y'all fully understand what's happening here. This is fire, okay? I'm gonna be honest with you, I'm gonna be transparent this morning. My greatest fear in life is burning alive. I'll drown, I'll do anything else. You can shoot me, whatever you wanna do. But to burn alive, no, okay? Not gonna have it. And that's what they're faced with. Last night I was grilling chicken up, okay? I had the grill covered in chicken, and I went to check the temperature. So you have to put your hand up over the fire to check the temperature. You know what happens when you do that? The hairs on your arm get singed. It gets really hot. You're trying to pull your hand away while you're trying to check it. Yes, there's oven mitts, but they just take too long. And last time I used an oven mitt, I dropped the thermometer, so that's not good too. I wasn't making tacos and burned my hand, okay? I wasn't doing that. I'm just saying. I'm just saying. You just get hot and things happen to you, okay? And so I'm sitting there checking that. And I'm sitting there thinking, okay, drinking s'mores on a campfire. You come in, what do you smell like? Smoke, right? Smoke follows beauty. It always chases me around. I can't get rid of it. Everywhere I go, smoke follows me, right? And so you just smell like it. And you can be out there for 5 minutes, come in, smell like smoke, have the arm hair singed. I mean, it's not incredible. These dudes were in the fire. 7 times hotter than your normal fire. No smell of smoke, no singed hairs, nothing different about them than when they went in. That's not normal, okay? And Nebuchadnezzar's like, hey, this is different. Nebuchadnezzar goes from liking them to hating them, so he wanted to kill them, to now worshiping the God they serve. Because what God can save people from a raging inferno? Their God. He witnessed that firsthand. Because look what Nebuchadnezzar says after that, verse 29. Therefore, I make a decree. Any people, nation, or language that speaks anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be torn limb from limb, and their houses laid in ruins, for there was no other God who was able to rescue in this way. Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. Did y'all notice which is what happened there? Because this ain't America today. Go back to 29 real quick for me, Stephen. Any people, nation, or language that speaks anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who's our God, by the way, what should happen to them? Be torn limb from limb, and their houses destroyed. There'd be no media people left in America if this was the king's decree now. I need y'all to understand what's going on here. The king goes from saying, worship me, to now saying, anyone who talks smack about their God, I'm going to kill. Because I've seen what this God can do, and there's no other God than him. As a matter of fact, when you continue reading the book of Daniel, you'll see how Nebuchadnezzar worships God, makes a slip up one day, and it gets to become a cow for a while, okay? It's a real big deal. But he understands who God is. And because they honored God, because they served God, what happened to them? They were promoted. The first time they honored God and stood up for him, they were promoted. The second time they honored God and served God, they were promoted. I don't know. It's almost like God honors those who honor him. I don't know. I'm just going, it just kind of looks that way. When you follow God's rules, when you love God more than anything else, when you obey God no matter the circumstances or the results, God watches over you. And God has a plan for you. So the question for us today is, how does this apply to us today, right? How does this story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego make an impact in our lives? How does it affect us? How does it change who we are? I think all of that can be summed up in one question this morning. And that question is this: will you bow down to the world, or will you stand for God? Guys, some of you aren't going to like this sermon today because it's very black and white. All right? And I'm going to tell you, God, that's the way God is. There's his way, and then there's the world's way. So I'm just going to go ahead and preface that because you're not going to like some of this stuff. Because it's absolute, and God is absolutely absolute. See, this question that I posed to you today is a simple question to answer up here. We all get it. Oh, I'm going to choose God. Problem is, that's a hard question to live out here. We're faced with way too much. The world offers us so many choices. The world offers us so many temptations, so many things that are pleasing, so many things that are created by God for us to be used a certain way, but the world has taken that, twisted it, and said, enjoy it this way instead. God made it. It can't be that bad. But God made it for this purpose, not for this purpose. And the world says, use it however you want. God loves you. He'll forgive you. You see, very few people wake up in the morning and say, hey, I want to ruin my life today. I'm going to make a choice that destroys my entire future. No, we start making these small choices. Small choices. We start bowing down to little things, caving in, giving in to small things. Well, that doesn't really matter. It's not that big. And we find ourselves on this slippery slope. And one day we wake up, how did I get here? You know how you got here? You know how I get there times? Because I didn't honor God. Bottom line. Because if I would have honored God, I never would have made that first choice years ago that put me where I am today. It's all about honoring him. Will we remember whose we are? 1 Peter 2 says this: but you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for his own possession, that you may proclaim the excellencies of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. Once you were not a people, but now you are God's people. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. Beloved, I urge you as sojourners and exiles to abstain from the passions of the flesh, which wage war against your soul. Keep your conduct among the Gentiles honorable, so that when they speak against you as evildoers, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day of visitation. Look, we are in this world, but we are not of this world. That's what Peter's saying here. Your life should be different than the lives of those people around you. Your life should be set apart. You're part of a royal priesthood. See, will you be like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, standing firm in the faith? Or you'll be like everyone else who bowed down. Don't let the enemy tempt you with lies. You have to stand firm. And please, please, please don't start with the argument that so often happens when we read the Bible. Well, that happened back then. Things are different now. Things have changed. What they did back then doesn't apply to us today. Okay, Ecclesiastes says there's nothing new under the sun. All right? The method of how something is might be different, but the sin itself is not new. It's been around forever. And by the way, on that argument, well, things are different now, they're not back then. How are they different now? They're wussy easier now. We live in America, okay? How many of you this week decided I'm going to stand firm for Christ and we're told, hey, I got this fiery furnace over here, I'm going to throw you in and burn you alive? No. You were afraid that someone might unlike you on Facebook. You were afraid that someone might call you a name. You were afraid that someone might think you're not as cool as they are because you didn't watch that movie, you don't watch that show, you don't listen to that music. You decided not to go there. Things are different. Ain't no fiery furnaces right now you guys are threatened with. We bow down for a lot easier stuff. All of those temptations, all of those are things that we should be standing firm against. And the reason why we don't stand firm is part of the problem. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego did not care. They did not care if they lived or they died. They said, I am going to honor God, period. I don't care if no one likes me. I don't care if I don't get cool points. I don't care if no one talks to me anymore. If no one signs my yearbook, I don't care. I'm not giving in. I choose to honor God. Listen, if what holds you back from following God is what people may say about you, then you are hanging out with the wrong kind of people. You should have people in your life when you honor God who come up and pat you on the back and say, well done, good job. If you don't, come to me after church. I'll help you find some of those people. Because we need people who encourage us to follow and honor God. You see, let's make a choice today to make God big in our lives and people small. Let's make a choice today to honor God and not people. Let's be the people who influence others instead of the ones being influenced. Jim Elliot, the great Christian missionary, who, by the way, died serving God, said this: Father, make me a crisis man. Bring those I contact to decision. Let me not be a milepost or a single road. Make me a fork that men must turn one way or another on facing Christ in me. In other words, I don't want people to see me and be like, oh, they're a little bit different. I want people to see me and be like, if I don't follow and do what that person's doing, I'm making the wrong choices. He wants to make a difference. God will give you the strength to do that if you ask him. Hey, God, I'm going to fight this battle. I need you with me. He's like, I'm already there. I'm already ahead of you. But there's one more thing I don't want you to miss today as we talk about this. And this is why Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego stood firm. You see, their view of God was big enough for them to acknowledge that he did not owe the Lord service because of what he could do for them. They did not follow God because they knew if we follow God, he's going to promote us. They didn't give their tithe to God because he said, I'll bless you if you do. They weren't interested in the reward or the circumstance that happened because they followed after God. They followed God simply because of who he is, because he's God and God alone. How do I know that? Because they said he's able to deliver us, but if he doesn't, we don't care. We honor him with our lives no matter what. It's not about what he can do for us, it's about how we can glorify him. How often do we make choices based on the outcome? If I do this, I get this. If I do that, I don't get this. I'm going to do this. And most of those outcomes are temporal. They don't last. In the end, they leave us feeling empty. You see, they were willing to yield to the Lord even if it meant they were going to die. They did not count their lives worth keeping if preserving themselves meant that they would dishonor God. They didn't want to live with that the rest of their life, that we failed God. She was about obedience to him. Samuel the prophet tells us that in 1 Samuel 15. And Samuel said, has the Lord his great delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices, as in obeying the voice of the Lord? Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice, and to listen than the fats of rams. God wants obedience. He wants to know that you're going to do what I ask you to do. Will you follow me? Even when things are hard, will you follow me? Look, whether this is extreme or not, God can deliver you from any afflictions you face. He can deliver us from oppression. He can deliver his people from persecution. I mean, Jesus in the Lord's Prayer says, deliver us from evil, because God can. I'm telling you, ask me for this because I will do this for you. But of course, all of this is easy to say when we're not threatened or suffering, right? Look, it's a hard thing to say, hey, God is over my suffering, my cancer. If you have cancer, he can be like, hey, God is sovereign over that. I believe that, right? It's hard to announce. What's even harder to announce is if your loved one has cancer. Hey, God's greater than their cancer. Because, we can be sacrificial with ourselves, but with other people we love, that's hard. What's even harder yet to say is, hey, God is sovereign over my child's terminal illness. Those are hard things to say. And the truth is, God's sovereignty can be hard to look at in such seasons. It can be hard in those moments to say, God can, God will. But the question that we have to answer within this brief moment that we live is this. If God does not do what he can, if God does not heal, redeem, repair, will we still trust him? If he refuses to answer our plans, please, the way we expect, will we love him, obey him, endure faith to the end? Will we, after praying to him about our deepest pains and our sorest hurts, will we look at him and say, hey, after casting these burdens on you that I can't handle on my own, if you choose to answer them differently than I expect, will I still follow you? Will you be like those 3 Jewish boys and say, doesn't matter, but if he doesn't? See, other Israelites laid on the ground around them, bowing to that idol. But they did not. They stood alone and said, we have faith in God, no matter the circumstance, that he's worthy and he's good for what he says he's good for. Our God will deliver us, but if not, will we still trust him? The Lord is strong enough to rescue us if he chooses. But if not, will we give in to sin? Our God is able to heal us if he declares it best. But if not, will we not forsake our confession of faith in him? Our God can undo the disability if he speaks the word. But if not, will we trust in the God who will raise us from the dead? Do you ever feel in your life like you're sliding down the chute into a fiery furnace? Do you feel like you're standing in the flames, which are burning 7 times hotter than usual? Do you feel like you simply cannot go on? Do you see that 4th person standing in the flames with you? Do you see him sympathizing with you? Do you see him suffer for you? As all else fails, is he enough for you? Do you believe his promise that you will suffer no more? Do you see him with you? Do you know the depths of love that he has for you? Do you know he is strengthening you? Even in this moment, even now, are his scarred hands holding yours as he whispers to glory to come? Or have you let the world and Satan take that joy away from you? Has he been sowing doubt in your hearts? Are you on the brink of dying, not because of the flames touching your body, but because they have begun to singe your faith? Has hope deferred made your heart sick? Listen, do not grow weary in doing good. Do not give up the fight of faith. Consider him who endured such hostility against himself so that you may not grow weary. Look, you may not be delivered from this furnace, but you will rise from it to a place where agony cannot follow. In the grace that God supplies, stand and stay. My God is able to deliver me. But if not, I will still glorify and bless his name. You see, it doesn't matter if you're in the furnace or not, because he's already there, waiting, preparing. You will never be alone when you face the furnace. There's always another in the fire.